In fact, laptops and tablets are becoming the new battlefield. This is a shift as opposed or just win. I'm Brian Cooley from CNET in search of the next big thing. Tablet die or just win? Did the tablet die or just win? I'm Brian Cooley from CNET in search of the next big thing. Tablet sales have been shrinking for some time. In the tech biz, that's a death knell. Even Apple's iPad line, basically synonymous with the category, has been on a lengthy sales slide that certainly wasn't tapered off in the most recent results, down another 20% in volume. In fact, laptops and tablets are becoming the new battlefield. This is a shift as opposed to a complete retreat. Notice how laptops are becoming more like tablets with detachable keyboards, for example, and often changing from a desktop-style interface to a touch-style one when you do the attachment or detachment. You also find a lot of laptops now that emphasize their flexibility, like what Lenovo does with their Yoga line. On the other hand, look what's happening with tablets. They're getting more powerful and more immersive and a little more serious in their use case than they used to be, therefore going after laptops. Examples of this would be the Apple iPad Pro or Microsoft Surface Pro 4, suitable for all but the most demanding computing and creative tasks, something you wouldn't say about the earlier tablets that hit the market. This all represents a shift in battlefield, as the tablet is now less head-on against the smartphone, trying to be a phone with a bigger screen, and instead is becoming more of an alternative or complement to the laptop, with greater usability, portability, and flexibility. It looks a lot like Chapter 2 and not Chapter End. Know what's next at cnet.com/nextbigthing. I'm Brian Cooley.
Today, she might forget to feed the fish. But look out for her. She's asking the tough questions, searching for answers, and feeding her mind. Who knows? In the end, she could be the one to clean the oceans. It's our job to make sure she has what she needs. Windows 10. Get started today.
The Stylus. It's not something we're actually crazy about. I mean, it conjures up images of the old Palm Pilot, the Apple Newton, the credit card terminal you last used. Steve Jobs famously railed against Styli a few years ago as really bad human-machine interface.
We're going to use a stylus. No. Who wants a stylus?
In recent years, smartphones and tablets have totally captivated us, and largely because they're touch. No training, no accessory, no gadget. It's intuitive. If you're 2 years old, you know how to use a touch device. Now, some mobile devices that do use a stylus have soldiered along in largely a supporting role, but there's evidence now that perhaps the stylus may move up to a full co-star, if you will, alongside the touchscreen, based on 3 emerging and refining criteria. First, there's greater precision. Your finger necessarily is kind of a blunt instrument. It ends in a broad, blunt tip, and it can't help but do much more than have these sort of vague, specific actions on a screen. The problem is we would like to do more fine inputs, especially for drawing and writing, for example. Now, there are some apps out there that have stylus input that let you select a thin line, but it's a menu selection. It's a conscious action. That's clunky interface. With a stylus today, the precision is so good. For example, the current Microsoft Surface Pro claims to be accurate within 1/2 millimeter of where you intend to tap 98% of the time that you do tap. That's almost imperceptibly off. Then there's position and pressure. If a stylus was nothing more than another way to poke and stab at things like your finger does, you might not take the trouble to buy one, keep from losing it, charging it, and that sort of thing. But in fact, the modern styli are developing a lot of nuance based on the pressure with which you use them, creating thick or thin lines, as well as the angle at which you hold it. Look at the new Apple Pencil on iPad Pro. Its actual inclination angle makes it create a different input on the screen, not just how hard you press it. Finally, there's lower latency. Microsoft's been doing a lot of interesting research around this as they develop Surface Pro, showing clearly this dramatic lag between the tip of your stylus and how long it takes for that to show up on the screen. If there is not an immediate reaction to the stylus, your brain, your eye, and your hand muscles notice it. Now we're seeing on devices like iPad Pro and Surface Pro that there is almost no latency between the movement of the stylus and the indication of that mark on the screen. It feels more like a real pen and pencil, which have 0 zero latency. Over recent years, of course, mobile devices have stolen a ton of share away from desktops and laptops with their keyboards, mice, and trackpads. The next shift in our behavior of input to machines may very much come from Styli and touch-sensitive mobiles. It may also mean you need to brush up on your handwriting and drawing skills. Know what's next at cnet.com/nextbigthing. I'm Brian Cooley.
It's the thought that counts, Molly, and you thought to go to Best Buy to get an LG. It's the thought that counts, Molly, and you thought to go to Best Buy, and that's an extremely good thought, because our Blue Shirt experts helped you pick out an LG G4 smartphone. It's got a rear-facing 16-megapixel camera and 100% certainty of blowing your photo-sharing kid's mind. Yes, Molly, your thought kicked holiday butt and took holiday names. And you won the holidays. Win the holidays at Best Buy.
Last time I took you for a look at 5G wireless technology was May of 2014. And back then, nobody expected it in the wild until 2020. Since then, the goal line got moved up quite a bit, as Verizon recently announced they will be doing field trials in the U.S. by fall of 2016 and have some degree of market availability in this country by 2017. That's even ahead of mobile ambitious South Korea in 2018 and Japan in 2020. Let's look at the reasons why we should once again take a look at 5G, including the fact that it's coming a lot sooner than we thought. Your first thought, I'm sure, is around speed, that 5G will be faster than 4G as it was faster than 3G. Yes, correct. And in fact, Verizon says it could be 30 to 50 times faster than your current 4G LTE. But take that with a grain of salt, because in the real world, we know the delivered speeds are different than the possible speeds. But speed, to me, is actually the least interesting of 5G's promised benefits. Here are a few I think are maybe a little more subtle, but more interesting. The first is low latency. That means when you create an input or request something on your mobile, over 5G, it'll take very little time before the other end receives that request, if you will. Now, this is measured in milliseconds, so it doesn't sound like a big gap, but it's a big part of why your phone can feel sluggish. A recent study by OpenSignal and Fierce Wireless found that the average latency on the big four carriers in the U.S. right now is between 75 and 100 milliseconds. The folks over at the 5G development teams will tell you the goal is to get latency on that network at 1 millisecond. That is dramatically different. Aside from just being a faster way to navigate the web, which isn't really the point, it will allow us to have applications like high-performance, very responsive gaming over wireless networks, as well as professional applications like remote telemedicine and surgery without any goofs, nothing that keeps cutting a half a second after the doctor stopped telling it to. And also robotic applications for industry that require absolute precision and, again, come down to low latency. Then there's lower power consumption. You don't often think of a type of wireless as using less power than others, but in fact, the wireless radio inside your mobile device is one of the biggest consumers of power. This is a big deal because it appears that any major battery breakthrough isn't going to arrive until flying cars. So let's make the most of what we have now. Then there's traffic prioritization. This is being baked into 5G from the beginning. It's an idea that says, look, if you've got a car going down the road with a 5G connection, it needs to know that signals from other cars to avoid collisions need to get through first, and that signal streaming a video to your kid in the back seat can wait a few milliseconds. And 5G is being built from the ground up to have that kind of smarts. And finally, there's cutting the cord, and I mean the entire cord. Right now, your home or business very likely have wireless inside them. But what's feeding that is a cable, twisted pair, fiber, or satellite connection getting to the curb, as we say. But 5G wireless promises to have so much bandwidth and be so stable in delivering it that you could actually use that to provision internet to a premise, which we don't really think of right now as a wireless technology. That means we have a much greater flexibility of saying, I need internet here, or here, or here, without having to worry what kind of cable or wire is available. So there are a lot of questions around 5G, starting with a whole variety of competing standards and development players right now. After that, we hope to get a 5G that is a thing versus a bunch of things using the same name. That's what 4G is really like today. There's cost. Who knows how you price something like this when it comes to market? What are the tiers? What are the gotchas? And what about data caps? If you've got a pipeline this big and fast, you're going to blow through a lot more data than they provision for you today, even on a generous plan. Finally, you're going to need a new device. No device on the market today can talk to a 5G network, but we're talking about a few years down the road, and you'll probably have a new device by then anyway. So keep this in the back of your mind. That said, 5G is definitely shaping up sooner than we thought to be the biggest innovation in mobile networks since mobile data. Know what's next at cnet.com/nextbigthing. I'm Brian Cooley.